Mel Murray-Serter is a legend.
Check 1 2. Do you want to give me a check 1 2?
Does that work?
She was previously the Ops Director for Europe at Vice before its dramatic downfall. She has been a driving force within the community of entrepreneurs that I ran called Foundrs from the very beginning. And since I left, she has become the Executive Chair of Foundrs, running the board. In short, Mel's a weapon. And in this conversation, we cover a variety of topics, including the downfall of Vice, how to be a great manager, managing a board, what does great maternity leave look like, Foundrs, the community and her journey within it, managing communication in a team, progression frameworks, performance reviews, team charters, and even her and Dan's relationship OKRs. So, please enjoy this wide-ranging, very energizing conversation with the legendary Mel Murray-Serter.
I need to come up with a good intro. It's like, so anything jazzy and AJ-esque.
Yeah.
Open to suggestions.
Thank you for joining me in this universe.
This alternate reality.
Yeah.
Diving into. So.
Thank you for bringing your soul.
It is welcome here.
It is welcome
this
here.
Soul dungeon. We talk about soulful things and soulful things only. Definitely.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Mel.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
But how do you describe yourself? Like,
I would describe myself as probably a very organised individual. I would say that I have a dark sense of humour. I love dogs.
but don't have any.
Don't have any anymore. Did have.
Okay.
Don't have. Very sad, everyone. I have 2 cats, but love animals. Will basically accost any dog I see on the street. I just love chilling.
Love chilling.
Yeah, it's my thing. Just don't like to do much. Like to watch a lot of movies, anything on TV. And then obviously love both my husband and daughter equally. Not a competition. Joint first place.
I've been going to it already at the start. Let's get into it. Equally, because also I'd assume that love for your husband and love for your daughter is different.
Yeah. Be weird if it wasn't.
It would be. But I suppose I'm assuming like you kind of have to say that they're equal because you couldn't ever say that you would love one more than the other.
No, but as in I'd say I love them equally.
Yeah.
I just don't probably love them equally at the same time.
You have like different moments where you like, really feel the love for someone, and other moments you're like, for fuck's sake.
Correct.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got that. That makes sense. I had an English teacher once who said, if someone asked me this question, who do I love more, my wife or my child? I would say my wife, because my child is so young that I haven't developed enough of a relationship with her to like feel that depth of love. Whereas for my wife, it's been a decade, so it's different. But I found that's always stuck with me since when I was 10 or so.
Weird thing for an English teacher to say to you.
Yeah, we obviously went off on a tangent, and that was all I took away from his English teaching. But yeah, okay, cool. And so then, how are you different at home versus at work? You're still very organised in both spheres.
Correct. Yeah, as I'd say that I'm probably pretty similar across both home and work, which I don't know if is a good thing or a bad thing. I just don't think I have the energy to be a different person in any other scenario.
Okay.
To change myself. So yeah, I'd say like still like, you know, have like a very like casual attitude at work where I think it like fosters like a really sort of like chilled vibe. There's not like a part of me that's like super serious or kind of like acts like a senior person. Put it this way, people are very, very surprised when I tell them my age, and I don't think it's because I look particularly young. I think it's more aligned with my behaviour. But
your behaviour seems young.
yeah, like I'm definitely wouldn't class myself as a professional person.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that you're like very comfortable with that, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
totally.
Like,
I mean, I still do like a really good job. This is the thing. I think a lot of the anxiety that I could have had like as a younger professional person, like in a professional setting, would have been that I needed to like act a certain way, behave a certain way, like give off a certain energy. And like one of the benefits of like getting older is you become more comfortable with yourself. You realize that can also apply to like the work setting. And I think the more you are like just relaxed as yourself, like you don't need to kind of like, you know, reimagine yourself in a different way for a different setting. You can just be you. And so that's definitely come with age, but I'm a very immature person. So I'm just myself.
Yeah.
And like being immature in a professional setting, I guess can come across as being younger.
I really like that. One thing that comes to mind though is that I'm assuming we're always like, as we get older and just get more comfortable and like stop caring about the outside world, what other people think and that sort of bullshit, we just become more and more authentic. And that probably come like when you're 60, you're going to be like more don't give a shit than even you are now.
Yeah.
And so then where do you think that might come from? So where's the part where maybe you're not fully authentic yet?
I honestly, like, and genuinely, like, and not to be lazy, like, hand on heart, feel like I can be myself in pretty much any setting. Like, I don't feel like I have to, I don't feel I have to tune or dial up, like, certain parts of my personality up or down, like, too much. I think, like, it's more just, like, reading the room. I'm obviously not a complete reprobate in a setting where it's, like, completely inappropriate. Although some would say that that's not true, but I think it's more a case of like me. I just feel like I am myself in pretty much most circumstances. I think with lots of people, especially in a work environment, you can obviously have that feeling like imposter syndrome, like that you're, you know, somewhere that maybe you shouldn't be yet, or that you're not ready for. But I like, it's the same analogy. It's like everyone has to go to the toilet. I'm like, everyone just feels that way. It's just a thing. And like, the more we get in our heads about that kind of like feeling, or that everybody is like thinking something about us, I'm like, everyone's too busy thinking about themselves. Nobody's actually thinking about you in that scenario. And so, yeah, I guess like think more about that now. So if I ever do kind of start to slip into like that self like analysis of like, oh my God, like, am I the right person to be doing X, Y, and Z, or, you know, in this place, I just quickly like shut it down and be like, nobody cares. Nobody's thinking this.
Yeah. But has there been a time where it hasn't been received well?
My
like, personality.
Yeah,
so it hasn't like, well, you're like, let's say you describe yourself as being not very professional in the typical sense. And so you said like someone else, other people may not have thought.
Yeah, of course. There's been times where it's like, you know, there's certain scenarios where you should be behaving in a certain way. And I've definitely allowed my personality to take over and be maybe slightly more playful than is appropriate in a certain setting. And yeah, that's like in work environments when I was like more junior and I was just like having fun. I mean, this was when I worked for a very large newspaper and I was hiding under people's desks to scare them when they came back from getting a coffee. Or when the managers weren't there, would have races on the chairs, you know, like the wheelie chairs up and down. It was a really big office. I think I bubble wrapped myself once and made people push me on the chair. Like the standard things that you'd see in like a high school thing, except this was like a very professional working environment and it just definitely wasn't appropriate. If I was managing myself, I wouldn't have kept me, which they didn't. I'm talking like years and years and years ago. So yeah, it's not like last week.
Right. Fine.
But yeah.
And has it happened where have you felt that there's been like a reaction to you being more casual than other people in more recent times? That feels like early, like recent graduate period.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like it probably comes across more when you're working like international companies. So generally in like the UK, having like a more relaxed approach to work. I think, I mean, and I work in media predominantly and have for most of my career. And I think that there is like a more playful aspect in that work environment. Whereas like when you work with more international teams and, you know, there's teams based over, I mean, in Europe, but also in maybe the UAE or China, and there's just a very different like working culture. And so I think that's where I would have to moderate myself. But that again is just like the same way that if you go to a different country and you're kind of like just respectful of people's like cultures and environments. So again, I don't feel like it's not, I haven't had a situation from my side at least, but I've observed that it's been negatively received. But yeah, that's a place for sure that I would say is like something where you'd have to dial it down a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that leads me into something I'd love to chat about. But first, could you give us like a extremely accomplished career? So could you give us a brief run through of
what I've done?
Yeah, of the highlight moments, or maybe just like what you're most proud of along the journey?
I am probably most proud of the fact that I've been able to hire like really great people into companies that I've worked in. So even if I'm not there, some of those individuals still are, or I gave like certain people a chance because I could like see something in them, even if they hadn't like come from that background. And I think that that's something I've been really proud of, is like bringing in like good people and then like getting to see them like flourish, which is like from like a manager's perspective, like something that I really value. It's why I like being a manager. And then I'd say for like myself is probably the thing I'm most proud of. Probably like having like the courage to like leave things that weren't right for me, rather than like really try because I thought that, you know, as in for an example, like, you know, if I've been in like a working environment which hasn't been right for me, instead of like being like, oh God, what are people going to think if I leave and it's not right? I've just been like, no, like I need to go and it's not right for me. And being able to like just trust my instincts on that, because I've always ended up in like a really good place afterwards, even if it can be scary to begin with, which I'm sure you can identify with. So yeah, that's probably the things I'm most proud of. And then in terms of like a highlight of like my career, I started in broadcast buying in media, and then moved through into being like a PA at a large newspaper. Then I kind of like moved sideways into different roles at that particular company, where, I mean, I worked in like the IT department. I got moved off onto like random like projects for like product development. I then like moved into like campaign management, which was kind of like account management on the commercial side of the business. And then once I got into the commercial side, like I really enjoyed it. And that's where like the rest of like my media career kind of like navigated through just different publications. So magazines, other papers, and then through to digital. And most recently I was over at Vice, across Vice ID and Refinery 29. And then there I like spent most of my time in the commercial side of the business, specifically on digital, moving into operations. And now I'm still in operations, but more on the creative side of the business, and I'm at a tech company. So that has been it. And then alongside that, for probably the past decade, I've also been helping to build an amazing founders community, which spans across the whole of Europe, but predominantly in the UK. And that's been amazing, because in that role, or like the way that I've interacted with that community has really been on events mostly. And now I sit as like the chair of the board, which is completely new to me. But again, I feel incredibly lucky to be just working with amazing people. And the side of it that I love is this thing that I love about work, which is managing people. So like as the chair of a board, I've got to kind of like build out that team who sits on the board alongside me, and they're all way more accomplished than me and incredible and intelligent. And it's just like a delight to be working with them all the time. So yeah, that's my whistle-stop tour of my career.
Stunning.
Thanks.
Can definitely empathise with that last feeling around dealing with people that you feel are further along than we are, which I would disagree with, but nonetheless we'll get into that separately. So if we rewind the clock, and how long were you at Vice for?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then recently you left and Vice then crumbled.
I know. God, what can I say?
Which-
I
didn't know my own strength.
yeah, it's
apparently.
crazy. Yeah.
So like what happened in from a high level, and then what do you think happened in a more micro level?
I mean, I think what happened is the same thing that happens with a lot of companies, which is just like really quick growth and having certain goals and investments aligned with that growth, and then it not being able to be maintained. And so I think, like, unfortunately, like, Vice is an incredible brand. It's why I wanted to join it. A lot of people would describe it as being like a cult, and I would probably agree. Like, I'd say, like, yeah, like, I loved it. I loved that brand. I really identified with it. I was a consumer. I spent a lot of my career working in places where I wouldn't have been a consumer of the content that I was helping to create. And so it always felt quite like disjointed in that regard. Like, I loved the companies I worked with, but it was just, I never felt like that connected. And so Vice was probably one of the first places where I really felt connected to the content we were creating. And I loved it. And I loved the people that I worked with. And honestly, like, some of the most talented, like, people I've ever worked with as well. So if anyone's hiring, they are amazing. And yeah, just like had the best time. It was a really great culture. It had, it was trying to grow up when I joined. So it wasn't, what it was, what people had kind of like always thought it was, which was just kind of like a party central, like everybody just, doing loads of drugs and, drinking, and which I think as a lot of people felt that was what Vice's culture was. And really it was just full of like very smart, passionate people who had fun as well, and loved being there. And then, as with loads of businesses during the pandemic, it, had a really rough time, as did everybody. But I think culturally it really suffered. And I mean, I was going through my own changes and challenges as everybody was, but I was also becoming a mum. So that was like a big shift in kind of like my own, how I would interact in a business as well, from like a cultural perspective, like how much I would, I guess, like be available to kind of like building relationships in that regard than I would have before becoming a mum. And so again, like coming out of like a pandemic and then like rejoining at work, like for me, like as opposed to, why did Vice end? Many reasons. Like, why did I leave? Like, really it was to do with like the culture not being what it was pre the pandemic. And also that I wasn't the same. And so it was kind of like a double whammy for me. Not to mention that my job had pretty much like shifted to a totally different thing when I came back. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't see like any real like growth opportunity for me. I really like to have impact, which I'm sure lots of people do. But I'm pretty impatient when it comes to not having impact, especially when I had come, my role prior to like becoming a mum, going on maternity leave for a year, had been very results driven. And coming back, like it just felt like it wasn't. It was a lot more slow, which now makes sense. Seeing like, but at the time it was like, why, can I not do these things, or why can I not like? And it wasn't that anyone was like really like stopping me from doing stuff, but you could just see that there wasn't an appetite, and so that's why, yeah.
Your personal approach changed, but you couldn't put like hit the nail on the head with what exactly it was that changed. You just felt the effects of not being able to do your job the same way you did it before. Is that right?
My job had changed.
Your job had changed.
My job had changed, yeah. I think, but even if my job pre-maternity leave had been identical and I had like stepped back into the exact same setting and that role, I still think that it wouldn't have been a role that would have had like much impact because of where the business was going. I just didn't know that. Like, I didn't know that the company was headed where it was headed. I wasn't like I didn't have a crystal ball. And whilst my timing was impeccable, I had no idea that was coming.
Wow.
I was the operations director for Europe. So I was in the leadership team across Europe. But yeah, not not so high. I mean, it was all led out of like the US and
Fine. So then thinking about how you experience this change and how you approach work post being a mum, if you're then sitting on the other side of the table and you have someone who's going on mat leave and they're a pivotal person in the business and they go on mat leave and come back, how would you then bring them back into the business such that they feel comfortable and that it is aligned? Do you have to like sort of almost do like a re-interview process, be like, cool, what's changed for you, what hasn't? Or how would you look at it?
I mean, it's an interesting question because I think that firstly, it depends on the size of the company. I was in a huge business and they had an amazing maternity policy and I felt really supported and held by my manager and the HR team. They literally did everything that they could. I was also really sick when I was pregnant. So I was pretty ineffective during my pregnancy, even whilst I was still at work because I was so unwell. And my manager was unbelievable alongside like the HR team. So again, like felt super supported. So none of the transition like into being a mother from the business was literally nothing that I would have changed. And I also had the luxury of being able to take a full year off as well because their maternity package was so great. So
can you break down that maternity package?
It was like I had been there like at that point, I think over 4 years. So your benefits have like a different tier. So I think I had like 6 months full pay, and then 3 months on stat, and then 3 months unpaid. So it was amazing. But I think like with that size of the company as well, they had other people that they could have do my role. It wasn't a case of needing to even hire in like a maternity cover. Like whilst I was gone, my job was kind of just like split up across the team, which was great, which meant that, you know, it just parts of my job were just kind of like put on hold. Like the things I was working on was like, you can just carry on with that when you come back. So that was great. And I think like, but in smaller businesses as well, like they wouldn't be able to do that because resource could be super tight. Like, you know, if things get put on hold, maybe they get put on hold indefinitely and then aren't seen as like necessarily like strategically important for the business. And, you know, I think those things just play out how they play out. But with, in terms of if I was managing it and trying to like bring somebody back into the business, I think it's just like having like a really open like dialogue and having that like communication. HR teams generally, like as you're returning, will put together like these kit days. So like keeping in touch days as you're about to like phase back in. So you can do like a few, usually I think you have to do 10 and they're just like full days, so they're paid as you return back to work, and you work usually with your HR business partners to figure out like what your return to work is going to be. And as you decide whether you're taking 6 months, 9 months, a year, or whatever it is that you do, you'll kind of like work with them to schedule that in and like keep in touch with your teams. I'd say that like each person is different. I know people that have gone back to work after 4 weeks. I know others like me who have taken a full year and had no contact with work. And I just think it depends on what your role is. If it's a startup, if it's, you know, bigger, whether you need to or not. I'd say that like from my experience, like next time around, I'd probably want to keep in touch a little bit more regularly, because things move really quickly and it can feel like very overwhelming, like coming back after having such a long break and things having changed. And you kind of feel, and not only are you navigating yourself as a new person, but you're also like, oh, I don't recognize any of it. People have changed, people have left the business, new people have started. So many things can happen like across that time period. So yeah, the more that you can keep connected like throughout, I think it just makes that transition a little bit easier. So I think that that's what I would probably do to help the other individual on the other side if I was managing them.
So what does you having kept in touch look like practically? You said you have these keeping in touch days, but like I'm assuming you're not going to go through like, oh, Jenny's left and they've got a new guy in called John, or like maybe it is like this project's been parked, this project started.
I think it really depends on the role that you're doing. Like my keep in touch days were to just start to it's kind of like doing the reverse handover. So it's starting to like be invited back into meetings, like just seeing like what the lay of the land is, like how things are going. it's almost like a little bit like when you're starting somewhere new, where you're just like getting to grips with how everything is. And like just, you know, having those like point of contact, like meetings with, you know, your team members or your manager, etc., to kind of just like get all of like the admin bits sorted. But yeah,
kind of like going in light version, like almost part-time, in various places. And then Foundrs.
Yeah.
But Foundrs has been going the whole time, but then Foundrs accelerated a lot, obviously, like last year.
it did. Yeah.
So tell me your Foundrs story.
So Foundrs. So my husband, Dan, who obviously, you know, very well, and his mate, Rob, started Foundrs. And I obviously know both of them very well. And the community had at that point only been in person from a dinner point of view. So the events side of it were very small. And there was massive appetite to kind of get more people together. These dinners are kind of like 10 to 12 people. And the only other way that the community were really interacting was online. So the aspiration was to hold these like big retreats with like 60 of the members, 70 of the members, for a whole weekend, and pull together all of the content and, you know, the process and everything. And like I said at the beginning, I'm like super organized. I'd worked in events as part of like the stuff that I'd done from a commercial perspective for brands, where we'd pull together, you know, the event would be a part of the content that we were putting together for our brands. And so I had experience in it as well. So like, would you like to help like put on like our first ever retreat? And this was obviously alongside my day job. So I was like, it's a lot of work. It's like a whole nother project. And I was like, I'll do it. But you guys, you'll basically have to listen to absolutely everything I tell you to do. Otherwise I'm not doing it. And they foolishly said yes. So I got to boss them around for a few months, and it was Dan and Rob and another guy called Luke, who had been the community manager for Foundrs. And between the four of us, we pulled it off and put the first fun conference together, which was held in one of our members' beautiful countryside homes in Wiltshire. And it was amazing. We had 60 founders there. There was fancy dress. The content that we ran was in an unconference model. You're familiar with all of this. I'm doing this purely for the benefit of the listeners, where all of the content is created by the people who come, by the attendees. So we had, I think, like somebody ran like a hat making session, which was so fun. Somebody else did a salsa making session. Then we had like pechacuchas, which are basically very quick presentations, back to back. There was like music classes, like we had people playing on the piano, kind of like the Piano Man vibe of, you know, just singing along. And then there were like more business sort of sessions that were ran, from, you know, how to pull together OKRs and like what's it like to no longer want to be a CEO kind of vibe stuff. And it was amazing. And it was very, it required like everybody who came to do something. So we were the chefs, we were the cleaners, we were setting up the rooms and breaking them down. And so it was amazing to see, you know, these incredibly accomplished like CEOs and founders basically washing dishes and like cleaning up beer cans at the end of the night before hopping back on a coach to go back to a room that they were sharing with another person, because we were just trying to make everything as efficient as possible. And it was really lovely, and we all just had like the most incredible time. And then we did it again and again. And then obviously when the whole of Foundrs kind of like started shifting more towards these in-person events, the pandemic happened, and we kind of had to scale that fully back, as everyone did. Lost many deposits, and obviously I became a mum, and so I fully stepped away from Foundrs for about 2 years, which was basically the entire time that you were looking after Foundrs. And yeah, obviously you've shared your experience with Foundrs many times, and it's a very difficult thing to do by yourself, which you were doing for 2 years. And you were trying to do everything, not just the events. And the events take up a lot of time. But yeah, that was kind of my experience of kind of like working with founders. And then one of the things which has always been, it's still true now, I'm not a founder. So I'm like one of the only people in Foundrs who is not a founder. And I'm glad I'm not, basically. I'm definitely not built to be a founder. I am in awe constantly of like meeting all of the founders that are in the community, of how driven and passionate they are about their businesses. I'm especially in awe of the ones that do it on their own. But it's why the founders community is so important, so that they have peers that they can go to ask those questions, especially if they're by themselves and don't have a co-founder. But yeah, and so now my role at Foundrs has changed again. So now I'm the chair of the board, and that's really to kind of like pull together a team to kind of like help guide it and lead it. So again, that's all made up of members from the community. So they all run their own businesses, and then they're just giving more time back for free to make Foundrs great. And they're doing an amazing job. So yeah.
Like it was at the first retreat.
Like it was at the first retreat.
Going back to the roots.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think that you're not cut out to be a founder?
Oh, I just would never. I very much like working for other people and pulling together what I need to like make their vision and strategy come to life. I don't think I would be able to do that for myself, as in to motivate myself to do it for a thing that I feel passionate about. It from a business perspective, I can obviously do that for other things in my life. But to make that like make money for myself in that way, like it's just, I mean, it's the same reason why I don't particularly like being freelance.
And you said something that was around the motivation. You said like you wouldn't be motivated to do it for yourself.
Yeah, I'd find it really difficult to motivate myself when it was really difficult to get up and do it. And I think at the beginning in like a startup, when you start something on your own, it's yourself, and you need to like be able to motivate yourself to be able to do the stuff that you maybe don't know how to do it, or you're just plain bad at it. And you still need to try, because it needs to get done. Like you need to motivate yourself to do it. And I love learning, and I love learning new skills, but I have the luxury of being in a place where I get to do the thing that I'm good at. And that's what I'm being paid to do. And I like to just focus on the thing that I'm really good at. And I definitely would find it, and I don't find it hard at all to motivate myself to do something I'm good at. It's very difficult to motivate yourself to do something that you're not good at, but you have to do anyway to make it succeed. So
it's almost your ideal is coming into the business when it's just developed past the stage that you have to do everything stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely don't mind at all like rolling up my sleeves and having to do things like joining a startup. Like there's always going to be aspects that you're doing things that you maybe don't want to do or maybe aren't great at, but you're not by yourself. And I think that that's probably like the main area that I would struggle with as being a founder, is that part is, you don't know how long that part's going to last for. Hopefully not very long, but yeah, in some cases it can be.
Very true. Going back to Foundrs, I obviously only experienced it for the past 2 years, 2 and a bit years, and you've experienced it the past 10. How has it changed over time? What's gotten better? What's gotten worse? Would love to hear your reflection on that.
I think not a lot has changed. I think it's probably a testament to everybody who's in the community, as well as those that have helped like guide it, that like the spirit, all the core elements of what Foundrs has kind of been able to be maintained. And it is magic. It sounds really I mean, you feel the same way. It sounds silly, but there is a magic, and especially at the events. And I think anybody who's had the privilege of being part of a community anywhere when you get to spend time immersed in it, for whether it's like a night or a weekend, you just come away feeling so full of just gratitude and love and all of those really lovely airy fairy like things. But it's true. And I think we've been really lucky that the community has kind of like been able to maintain that magic with people moving in and out of it, whether that's like the people who have led it or the members themselves, with new people joining. I think that's because we've had like amazing people join, and just from the board, the people that join the committees or just like throw their hat in the ring to help, people want to pay it forward because they've had so much value from it. They just want to give back. And that just creates like a really beautiful like pattern within the community. So that's the thing that we've been really lucky with, that has not changed at all. I think the things that have changed for the better have been that we've become a little bit more grown up. People don't share beds anymore at events. I know. I mean, if they do, it's obviously fully consensual, but like now you can have your own bed. So the structure of the events and stuff has become a little bit more formalized, where, you know, we will have people who do the cleaning up and the cooking, and it means that everybody can like really just focus on enjoying themselves and contributing in slightly more fun ways, unless obviously you love cooking and cleaning, in which case I'm sorry, it's probably not the right event for you to come to. But yeah, so that stuff has been like super positive. And especially like now with the board as well, we're really trying to get things just super organized. It's my thing. I just want things to be very clean and tidy. And then other than that, the stuff that has changed is probably the types of founders over the last decade. Like there has been a even bigger shift to, you know, being a business owner to being a founder, and more people are aware that it's a possibility to go and like create something that is yours, whereas before it wasn't like as much of a thing. And even like for myself, knowing founders, it just, as in not obviously the community, but people in general who were founders, it's like nobody was one. Nobody would have referred to themselves as one. It just would have been like, oh, I've got a side hustle, or I've got a business that I'm like building. And I think the term like founder, well, on the flip side, maybe not such a great thing. Like everyone calls themselves a founder now. You know, they've like made something, so I'm a founder of this, and it's like, I don't know. What's really nice is that like it's kind of become a little bit more democratized. There's more people knowing that they can go and like build something, which I think is amazing. And so we've seen a different type of like founder coming into the community as well, that maybe wasn't present 10 years ago, which I think is awesome. So yeah.
I love that. And so it sounds like you have these amazing foundations. You have this community spirit. You're putting together this amazing boards and making everything really nice, clean and tidy and organised, which I did a terrible job of, so it's cleaning up my mess.
Part of it is that, yeah.
What does that now allow you to do with Foundrs? Like, where is it going?
Well, like one of the things that Foundrs has always struggled with is revenue. I think it's the same with any business. Like, you know, being able to generate revenue. I mean, the thing that's, you know, we're not a for-profit business, so everything goes back into the community, but events are expensive and we want to be accessible, and we want to make sure that like the members get a big benefit from the community, from their experiences, but obviously being able to experience those experiences and have access to them. So that's one of the big things that we're focusing on, is making sure that we can make it sustainable and accessible. So that's one of like the core focuses that we have, along with just making sure that we've got the right sort of people in the community. We don't want all of the people to be the same, from the same background, building the same types of businesses. That's never what Foundrs has been about. And so it's being able to have that diversity in like membership, where people can really learn from one another, from all of the different areas that they can.
So for other people managing or running communities or founding communities, what does that look like practically? You've got obviously a revenue piece and a sort of diversity of experiences piece. For the revenue side, Foundrs is currently run off sponsorship. There are sort of 9 or 10 sponsors. They pay between sort of 10 and 15 grand each year. And so that then just keeps the lights on. And so what do the next sort of revenue channels look like? And then what does that allow?
I mean, there's so many different opportunities that you can have from a revenue perspective. It just depends like what access you're willing to give, or what you're asking for in return. So obviously we've got, we refer to them as partnerships, which are the year-long or longer partnerships that we have with some of our sponsors. And then there are like more traditional sponsorships, which are kind of like one-off ad hoc sponsorship. So that's something that we're looking into to sort of like separate what a partnership is to a sponsor, as well as like looking at, who could be a sponsor that you wouldn't necessarily have as a partner. And this is fully like my perspective, like partnerships should be with businesses or organizations who you feel are an extension of your own. The ones where you've got like an affiliation with them in some capacity, that you're trying to build something similar, or you're trying to kind of like have you've got a similar outlook in what you're trying to do. But especially for a community, it's like we're working with those people because we know that they give a benefit back to the members. So as an example, you wouldn't have like a company like Philip Morris, not to call out, or I'll just call them a tobacco company, being a partner, because there isn't really any benefit to your members. And whilst there could be a lot of money there, it wouldn't feel like a natural extension of Foundrs. Whereas if you're working with like a wealth management company, you could be like, yeah, because some of your founders would need access to that, and that makes sense. And it's something that Foundrs doesn't offer. So it means it can be an extension of us as a community to make sure that there's like now a service available to the members that they would obviously benefit from. Therefore, with like, the sponsors, I kind of feel like you could go to a tobacco company if you wanted to, as an example, because it doesn't need to deliver. It's literally there to just generate revenue. And if it makes sense for that particular thing that they're sponsoring, then great. Again, I'm referring to a tobacco company because it's obviously a very contentious like type of like business to go towards. Yeah. But that's just to show like the difference in what you would do for a partner, but not a sponsor. So that's something that we're looking at. And when we talk about sponsorships, it's like sponsoring specific events or like key moments that happen in the community, generally event-based. There's also the option to obviously charge a membership fee to the community themselves. That's obviously one of the more lower lift ways to generate revenue. But depending on how much you're charging, it can also change like the relationship between the community and members, their expectation, what it is that they get in return, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's probably like a ton of other ones which are all related to maybe who your members are and how you can maybe leverage that, and building things in partnership with the members to kind of then generate revenue for both you and the member. So yeah.
Can you double click on that last one?
So that could be like mentor programs, things like that you could build alongside like your community, so that whilst you'd have like kind of like a shared revenue. I don't know exactly what that structure would look like, but it's more something that you do with your members. So it's almost like looking at the members as a product, and how you'd be able to monetize that.
That's interesting. Because then the danger with that is keeping the relationship between the community and the members like quite pure. I suppose like what I found difficult when I was running it was that it was all partnership led, and I love your framing in terms of we're not going to offer wealth management services ourselves, but our members need it. We know their needs and their problems, so we'll partner with the right people to solve those problems. It makes the whole community experience that much richer. But then that meant, from my perspective running the community, the partners were actually the customers and the members weren't the customers. And so now with this change, let's say you have this mentorship platform and the members are the mentors and you charge for mentorship conversations or whatever. Now the members are the customers and the product. And so then how do you balance the different incentives?
You just keep them separate. I mean, it would be very much like the way I would see it was that like it would almost be like another business, but you are just resourcing that business through your own funnel, which is like your members. And it would obviously be done fully with their consent and like desire to want to be a part of it. I think that's where to be able to generate like, and from my perspective at least, like to generate any additional revenue which aren't in like traditional ways, would have to be done like through the members.
Super interesting. Okay, this is cool. I'd love to know now about, like, you spoke a lot in your interview with Sarah Tuzani, which is a great read. So I'll post a link in the description so people can check it out. You spoke a lot about managing, and there are loads of questions I'd love to ask you around managing, but more specifically, you've now gone from managing a team beneath you to now running a board. This is the sort of dynamic that founders have to deal with in running their businesses. You've got your team, you've also got your board. How have you found that transition now that you're not telling people what to do, who are your direct reports, but instead you have peers who are super accomplished in their own right and offering this for free as volunteers? How is managing those different groups of people different?
So I don't find it that different. And I think it's because, the way that you phrased it was that, you know, being a manager in work is that you're telling people what to do. And I generally don't tell people what to do.
Love that.
If you find yourself telling people what to do, they probably shouldn't be there doing the job. You know, in an ideal world, you hire people that know how to do something better than you and that you learn from them. I'm really lucky that is the case with where I work at the moment. People that I work with are like highly accomplished and are very talented and capable. And so like I have the luxury of being not telling them what to do, but maybe helping them see things a slightly different way, and helping to kind of like coach them into being like an even better version of themselves. And that's what I think like being a good manager is. It's just being a good coach. It's like building a team like any other team. And that is that you take all of the best parts that they have and all of the skill and you just like hone it and you make it better.
What does that relationship look like practically?
I don't ever see myself as like, I don't, you know, whilst I think that there has to be like that hierarchy and like management and everything else, is that like I'm very much, we're all in the same team. It doesn't matter to me what the title is or seniority, age, none of it matters. Is that like you're all there to just like perform in the best way that you can on the thing that you're doing. And you do that collectively, like as a team. So I'm very much like their sidekick, as opposed to above them or anything else. If anything, I'd say like I'm under them to help support them, and to help like guide and steer them. And so like with the board, I'm there literally for the exact same thing. They're all brought in to do the things that they're really good at. I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm just there to maybe sometimes make the final call if there's like any kind of dispute over a certain, you know, which way should we go, and maybe I get like the final say on that. But generally like they're all there because they're really great at the thing that we've asked them to do. And so really it's just to help like steer it in the right direction, and kind of like set the framework. And I mean, honestly, it's like keeping time, making sure that the stuff that's supposed to happen is happening and that it happens within the time frame that we said it would.
So how do you hold people accountable in a coaching manner?
So I said this in the article. I love OKRs. I think it's like the best way to kind of like build together to know that you're actioning something. I think when it comes from a coaching perspective though, the OKRs are really for the business and to know how you are performing, or not even how you're performing, but like what you should be focusing on to help the business get to where it needs to get to. So you can see how you play a part in that and how it all fits together as, you know, the big puzzle. But I think in the personal development, it is like personal development goals and having things that you want to be able to achieve as an individual. And so when I'm like coaching the team, it's like working out with them, like, what's your wish list? What would you love to be able to be doing that you're not doing at the moment? Or how can we get you to there? And it's like figuring out like all of those like milestones that they might want to hit. and helping them get to that point and breaking it down. Okay, like what do we need to do to get there? And then them being able to obviously articulate what that thing is, what those things are, and just keeping a check in. Okay, well, have you done that thing yet? Like, if you haven't, why haven't you? What's the blocker? How do we remove the blocker? Like, what can we do to get you moving there? And it's like a really clean way of working, because it means that if they haven't done a thing, you can be like, well, that you haven't done that thing, and if there wasn't a reason other than you just didn't do it, you're literally the only thing that's standing in your way of getting to that next stage. So it's a really clean method.
You have these like mutually agreed upon goals and targets, and then you can hold someone account in a sort of more collaborative way as opposed to like accusatory way.
Totally. It's classic turn of phrase, the master of your own destiny, right? Like, you need to take ownership like over the things that you want to change, because like you're the only one that can like do that for yourself. It doesn't matter if somebody's like berating you or calling you out on it. It's not going to make a difference if you don't want to do it yourself. So yeah.
And so then when it comes to hiring the right people into the team, which is something that you said you were particularly proud of, how do you ensure that their motivations are really aligned with the business and the role that they're doing, such that there isn't this mismatch further down the line?
One of the things I think is important in any organization is managing like expectations and being very honest about what the situation is and what people are getting into. Half the time people come to businesses, the reason why there is that misalignment is that something's either been missold or misrepresented, or maybe the job description hasn't been thought through enough, that people think they're going to be doing something and then it's not the thing that they're doing. So I think like all of that prep work to make sure that you know what the job is, you know what needs to get done, and you're really like clear on that, so you can communicate that clearly to the people who are spending all of their time going through how many rounds of interview processes to get that job, but also making sure that you're managing their expectation of what the thing is that they're going to be coming in to do.
That makes complete sense. I'd love to zoom out a little bit in terms of like management, because in that interview you said how you felt, I think it was while at Vice, you felt ill-equipped to have some certain types of conversations like around pay and promotion. And as a manager, I suppose if we're speaking to managers earlier on in their journey who don't know how to have these conversations or haven't done those reps, what are some of those core foundational systems, processes, ways of working that you think are indispensable when helping managers?
It's something that I would struggle with in any business if they didn't have it, which was kind of like a proper progression framework. So it's essentially the responsibility of the business to be able to have a plan of where these roles are going to be able to kind of like go to. So you've got like your org chart, and within that org chart, you might not need every single position filled to begin with. You might only need like however many, like 30% or something at the very beginning of like a business. And then, but it's knowing that if you're hiring those people into more junior positions, like if they were going to progress like through the business, like what they would be doing, what that job would look like. So it's less about like the individual and more about that role, like what it should be doing and what it should be executing. And obviously when an individual comes into it, there's the twofold. It's like what they're getting, but also what the business needs, which is in the progression framework. And so it's like making sure that that is aligned. Like, again, like the communication and the managing of expectations of, you've got someone who's been brought in at a certain level to do the thing and they're doing that thing really well. And then if they start going, I really think I deserve like a pay rise, or I should have like, a promotion to the next senior position or whatever the title is that they're asking for, you can go, okay, well, let's take a look at the progression framework and be like, okay, well, if you were going to be going up to the next level, you were going to get a promotion, you should be doing X, Y, this job should be doing these functions. And it's like, you can quite clearly say like whether they are doing those things or not. And if they are, you should be like, yeah, you should be getting a promotion and a pay rise because you are doing the next level above. But if you don't know what that looks like, you can't have that conversation because you're not really basing it on any facts. It's more a case of like, you know, I've had people come to me before, I think I need a pay rise. You should be giving me a pay rise. I've been here for however long. And, you know, I've got kids now, so I need more money. And it's like, but you're doing the same job. I can have all of the empathy in the world, knowing that somebody's life has got more expensive and complicated, but that doesn't mean that they deserve a pay rise if they're still doing the exact same job that they've been doing and nothing has changed. But it's a really difficult thing to articulate if you can't show that. And so I think it's really important for the business to like think about like how the roles evolve so that the people who sit in them can understand whether they are contributing more or not. And it's a very like fair way to structure something.
At what stage of business have you found people put time into designing these org charts and progression plans?
Oh, I've seen like super small startups build them out. And I've been at big companies that don't have them. So, and then they're retrofitted, which is fine. But then you have to go through this whole leveling and banding system, which is painful to do later on.
What's leveling and banding?
Leveling and banding is just like for salaries, like knowing what level equates to what salary and how those bands like form across like different departments and different levels.
Gotcha.
So it's a lot of work for generally like a people ops like HR team to do. It's very difficult. And then especially if you're a global organization, that will also change based on where those offices are geographically, because you also would be doing like your salary banding and leveling from an industry perspective. So you'd have to start looking at what the industry standards are for paying for those types of roles as well. So it's a big piece of work. So the earlier it gets done, the better, the easier.
I suppose it's never done, right?
It's
Early
never done.
gets started.
Yeah, earlier it started.
Yeah, okay.
The other stuff that I would say is like important to have like a manager is what the performance reviews look like, what the structure is, what you should be doing as a manager alongside your report, so it's even and fair across the whole business, and that there is actually like a process in place. When there isn't, it means that one manager might do it really well just because they do, and then another is just not a very good manager or doesn't have the time or the inclination or even like the understanding of how to run a review process, and so they do it in a very different way. So it means that the people's experience, the employees' experience across the business can be completely different. Yeah, so I think it's really important to also define like, the structure of the process so that everyone kind of has like a bit of a guide on how to do it.
Could you give us a rough overview of what that performance review might look like, such that there is consistency across managers?
The basics would be like when they happen, so that they're happening at the same time and they're all kind of like being finalized. That the employees have a system or something where they self-review, so that there's also the bones of a conversation that can be built on. If you've self-evaluated as the employee, your manager can then read that and be like, oh, okay, it's interesting. They see it from this point of view. If you don't agree, you can start to kind of like see where maybe there's a misalignment, that you can already start to really understand like potentially why they have been doing things in a certain way. If they've self-evaluated, and you can really start to understand, okay, this makes a little bit more sense why they do X, Y, and Z. So again, it's the same in any relationship. Like, you have to talk. So the more opportunity like somebody has to say how they feel about something, the more you can help them, because you understand like where it is that they are, and you can meet them where they are and then help them get to where they need to be, to then go back and hold like a proper review process. But when you're reviewing them, you understand what you're reviewing them on, what you're benchmarking them against. So again, for the organization, to make sure you know what areas you should be evaluating for them, and then how that relates not only to the job that they're supposed to be doing, but how they're performing. And again, like knowing like what you're actually judging them on, if they wanted a pay rise or a promotion versus what wouldn't be looked at for a pay rise and promotion.
Sounds like it doubles up as well as like just a communication opportunity. So it's like you're just coming together to be like, cool, okay, this is the past 6 months, this past year, we probably haven't spoken about your what you're expecting from yourself, what I'm expecting from you. It sort of realigns you from a communicative standpoint. Are there any other things within the year that you think benefit or like contribute to communication but aren't directly focused on it?
I guess it would be more like a framework. So there's a few things that you could do. One thing that I really like to do is a team charter, and I think I referenced it in the article. And it's basically like an operating manual for the team. So it's how you all, like, what the team is, what you're there for, what your purpose is, what your mission is within the business. It's kind of, if you were going to like brand yourselves, what you are, who you are collectively. And then within that, you've also got like who you are as an individual. So it could be down to like, this is what my Myers-Briggs is, and something a little bit more formal like that, to like, this is how I like to receive feedback, and being able to tell people, if you've got feedback for me, this is how I like to receive it. And if you're going to ask for a meeting with me, I prefer to take my meetings at this time of day versus that time of day. And, this is how I like my coffee. Or this is how I like, it's just little things like that you can even do within it as well. And it's a really nice like team building thing to work on together, because you're all setting like the mission and purpose of like what your department is collectively and how you're all operating within it. And then you also get to kind of like write that bit about yourself, and you learn a lot about your teammates and your direct reports in doing it, which I think is really nice. You get to also circulate it around the rest of the business, which means they get to understand more about why you're there. And yeah, so that's like a really nice thing to do.
So you have the collective stuff that you agree on, which is like mission of the team, purpose of the team, values of the team, and what the objectives are. That seems like the group comes together to figure that out. And then you have these individual parts like the Myers-Briggs, like how you like to work, etc. From the individual parts, what have you found to be the most impactful pieces of information? Was it the personality test? Was it how you like to work, when you like to have meetings? What if you could only choose, let's say, 3 pieces of personal information that people contribute to this team charter? What are they?
Feedback, how they like to receive feedback. You generally end up giving feedback how you like to receive feedback. This like, you generally approach life in the way that you find you do things. And with feedback, that's like the worst assumption you can make, is that, that person will take this because I like have super direct feedback, so I'm just going to give that. And it's just like, no, it's an absolute shit show. So I think like really just asking people, like, and some people haven't thought about it either. Some people will be like, I don't know, how do I like feedback? I'm like, well, would you like it if I told you is immediately when it happens in a room full of people? But, oh, no, please don't do that. And you're like, right, okay. So that's already number one. You don't like that. You like it done privately. Some people are like, I'd hate to receive feedback like over Slack or an email, because it makes me feel anxious. And emails come through and it's like, we should talk, like, and it's like, please just do it, like, verbally, like in person. It's like, great, face to face, no problem. Other people are literally the reverse. They're like, I want to know the thing in the moment that it happens, but I only like it if it's phrased as like, constructive, like it can't be. And so then it throws it back to like the person who's giving the feedback to train themselves on how to give like constructive feedback versus just saying that somebody's shit or that they're wrong in something that they've done. So I think that's like definitely like the most important from a management perspective. I think that the one that's super interesting is like doing a Myers-Briggs or a personality-based test. There's like the 12 personalities test that you can do online. It's free. It also gives you an absolutely hilarious avatar. Mine is criminally bad. The one that I got, I look like a witch.
What is it called?
Do you know what? I can't even remember. I'm a Commander ENJ or something. It's like a super rare one. I don't say that proudly. And yeah, I just look like I'm bossing people around, which anyway, whatever. So, but that's like a really great one because you can actually learn parts about yourself in it that you weren't aware of. And sometimes it can help you understand yourself a little bit better. So I think as a tool for other people to know you, like it's great, but I think it's a really good thing to do for yourself. And yeah, it's something that some people just would never naturally have done on their own. And then I'd say they're probably the two most important ones: getting to know yourself better, and like the feedback one is super important.
So then, which part of you being a commander do you not like?
Do you know what? I think it's just the way that it was phrased in like the breakdown of, yeah, it just sounds like I'm a proper bossy pants, and it doesn't sound fun. Makes me sound very unfun, and a little bit like psychopathic. Is that the right word? Like a psychopath?
Yeah.
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 Even though psychopathic word, whatever.
Psychopathic is the right word. I didn't know whether you were trying.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. It's like a really small percentage of the world is this one.
Yeah.
And it's probably a really good thing.
Okay. Love that. And that's actually a pretty perfect segment. We'd love to transition on to just you and who you are outside of the working context. We spoke about how you felt like you changed your approach to work pre-becoming a mum, post-becoming a mum. What are other aspects of life that have changed with regards to just you and yourself pre-mum and post-mum?
It's super interesting. Like I said before, I had a horrific pregnancy. Hated being pregnant. And never sugarcoated it for anybody either. I don't think anyone does themselves or anyone else any favors when they try to pretend that something is better than it was. It was abysmal. And I'm still very animated about it when I talk about it, because I'm like, it was literally the worst time of my life being pregnant. And so when I had my daughter, I found so everybody during their pregnancy, or I say everybody, most people during their pregnancy are really focused on the birth and are really concerned about it, right? It's like a big thing. You've seen it in loads of movies. It can be really scary. It's also just like that line in the sand of pre and post becoming a parent, and could not wait to get it over with, obviously. But I had done loads of prep for the month after because I'm such a planner. So I was like, I need to have all of these things ready because if this goes wrong, I need to make sure that that's prepared. So I did everything. And we refer to it as the fourth trimester. So you're pregnant for there's 3 trimesters, and the fourth is like that last after the baby's out. And I had an amazing one. Everything just went so brilliantly for me, other than the fact that my daughter did need surgery at 6 weeks. But she was fine, and that was obviously very scary. But even that, I felt I took so much gratitude out of it, because I was like, well, it can't get any fucking worse, as I had such a bad pregnancy that everything after that was a walk in the park for me. So much so that pretty much every single medical professional that I ever went and saw, either in hospitals or the GP or anyone that came to me, was like, oh, is this your first kid? Because I was so chill that they just couldn't believe that this was the first time that I'd had a baby. And because I was just I just found that all so difficult that for me, I'm just so glad she's out of me. This is the simplest thing in the world. And so I was very lucky. I didn't have any, postnatal depression. My recovery was really straightforward. And I had a brilliant time afterwards. It was awesome. And I also never really felt disconnected from who I was before becoming a mum. I still felt like myself. And I've heard so often where people really feel so disconnected. Where I really struggled is when I started to stop breastfeeding, and my hormones really just dipped. And I definitely wasn't, I still wasn't depressed, but it was just very wonky. Everything was just, changing, and I'd already started back at work, but that my job situation was like change. So there was just like lots and lots of change like layered over. We were moving into our new house. There was still stuff going on with like the renovation. There probably wasn't like an area of my life that was the same. My location had changed, my job had changed, my role in life has changed. Like it was all different. And I think that's the thing that I probably like struggled with, is I didn't have like an anchor of something that was still the same, but I still felt like myself, which I feel really lucky about. And so going back to your question of like, you know, how have I like changed like pre and post like becoming a mum? It's like I'm totally different because you are like reborn. Like when you become a mum, there's a different like point of focus in your life as your child. Like your relationship obviously takes like a backseat and that evolves as well. And so there's more change there. But at the same time, I still like doing all of the same things. I'm really lucky that I've got a partner who totally pulls his weight. And I'd say we're probably 50-50 on everything that we do with Margot. And we're just very lucky. We're incredibly privileged. We have like a beautiful home. We live in a really lovely area. We're surrounded by our friends. We're near our family. We enjoy our work that we do. You know, there's not really like a part of me that feels like dramatically different, but at the same time, I'm totally different. So
I'd love to understand how your relationship takes a backseat and how that evolved.
It's a priority thing. You know, you start life, it's you. You know, you're by yourself, you're single, having the best time, can do whatever the fuck you want. You don't really have to tell anyone about it. It's an incredibly freeing and selfish time of your life. Enjoy it. And then there is, you know, you then decide to commit to somebody, and that's amazing because then you start building a life with somebody else in mind, and it isn't just about you, it's about us. And that's like an incredible thing to go through as well. You start like building like dreams together and all the things that you'd want to achieve. And that's like an incredible like process to go through as well. And, you know, if you're lucky, you also have done that a few times with some people and you step back down to the bottom of that ladder and you start again. But it's lovely because it's like that resilience of knowing that like you have another opportunity to always go and do that in life. There isn't just like one chance. Like you get to. And it's the same with work. Like nothing is ever dramatic enough. There's the only time that you could have done it. You can always start again. And so like in that relationship of building something with someone, it's like a really lovely thing that you're co-creating together. And again, it's quite selfish. You're in your bubble. You're doing the things that you want to do together as a couple. If you're lucky, you feel that way. If you don't, maybe don't stay in that relationship. And then, you know, it evolves. And if you want to have kids, and everybody does, but if you do and you're lucky and it's a smooth process to get to that point, you've then like created this life. And when they're a baby, they're literally a potato. You put them wherever you want to put them, which is awesome because you can kind of still keep flexibility. And then this little potato starts having opinions and demands. And more time is like focused on this kid because they take it, they deserve it, and they take a lot of attention. And it means that like, you know, you've gone from only thinking about yourself to then thinking about two of you. And then there's two of you are thinking about that one person. And like, there's so many layers. There's the layers of like not wanting to repeat the mistakes that maybe your parents made, not wanting to make any mistakes, forget like, you know, becoming your parents. Sometimes you want to do what your parents did. And am I ever going to be able to achieve the things that my parents did for me? Or vice versa. I don't want to make the mistakes that my parents made because they fucked me up. So, you know, I don't want to do that. And then you've also just like, you're surviving, you're still working, you're running a house, and finding the time to do it, have the energy where you're not like a dragon with your parent. And then if you're lucky, you've got a little bit of time to focus on the person that you're building this life with. And so it's like, you know, making sure that you still find moments for each other. And if you're really lucky, you can pay someone else to take the kid away so that you can have time together. And if you don't have that, like, you know, it's like relying on family. If you haven't got family around, it can be super difficult. So like, I think it's not that the desire for your partner or wanting to like be able to focus on your partner in that key relationship in your life goes away. It just slips down in the priority of what has to be done.
And then these moments that you have together, I imagine they evolve and change. Like maybe previously it was you have a weekly date night, and then when you have Margot, then you're like, okay, well, this is becoming more challenging. But I would love to have like an hour in the morning on a Sunday before she wakes up and we go and do something. Or I'm assuming these moments evolve, and then I'm also assuming that the satisfaction that you get from the relationship doesn't change, or it's not like lesser or more. It's just different.
Yeah, you adapt. It's like with anything, like things don't stay the same, which is great. It's a good thing that things don't stay the same. It makes it more exciting, and different challenges come different seasons. But I think it's like we're incredibly fortunate. We can afford childcare. Like our daughter's in nursery 5 days a week, and so we get space from her for each other and for the work that we want to do. We're going to the cinema tonight, but we're also going with friends because we love spending time with our friends as well. And so it's just, you do start to carve out, it just looks a little bit different how you spend your time together. And I think it's also really important to think of it as like, it's all part of like a bigger thing that you're building. Like you're building a life together, and there is a lifetime of those moments that you can, pepper, and it doesn't necessarily have to be how it was at the beginning. It can look slightly different. And then like planning, we plan a lot of our time together, and some people can feel, we have our relationship OKRs, and some people are like, oh God, you're like measuring all of the stuff and you're tracking, doesn't it just take like the spontaneity? And I'm just like, mate, if we didn't fucking plan it, it would not happen. Like if we didn't like get granular into what we want to design for like our life together, it just wouldn't happen, because we just wouldn't be aligned on it. We wouldn't, I think again, like managing those expectations of how you approach it is like super important. And so that's our way. It's not everybody's way, but it's our way of doing it. And so we plan it like our date nights, as well as the time that we're going to go to the gym, or the things that we're going to do with Margot or without her. Because it's the only way that we'll ever get it done.
Okay, I love this. And me and my girlfriend are just starting to set our relationship OKRs, inspired by you guys. So appreciate that. Which of your current OKRs feel the most challenging, or feel like you may not hit them?
Ironically, probably like our date nights. I've started a new job where both very, very busy at the moment. And so just carving out the time to think of something fun to do together, and then like go and book it, and then like try and like align our calendars so we can actually go and do the thing is like very tricky. So that's one that I'm definitely I'd mark it as an orange. It's in danger. It's at risk of not hitting the goal. But for me, I think as long as we've got like some good like quality time together and we're spending time together, it's okay. I think that's the thing with something like OKRs, is that like you set some bigger goals, and not hitting them doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that like it's a goal, right? You want to try and get as close to it as you possibly can. So yeah, hopefully we'll get as close to it as we possibly can.
Well, and the biggest goal, the overarching goal, is a healthy, long-lasting relationship.
Correct. Yeah, that's it.
Very cool.
The dream.
The dream. On that note, it's been so blessed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, babe.
I've loved this. Very informative. I've learned lots of things about managing, but also about relationships and having kids, which is something I'm looking at and learning about slowly. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.